So we had primary fun day a little bit ago, and guess what? I got to wear my fart shirt, because what a perfect day to wear a fart shirt when you're a principal, when you're hanging around with primary students who still appreciate a good fart joke. So I thought. So anyways, I wore my fart shirt, and we were getting the kids all ready to get into their groups to go outside and have a lot of fun. And we gathered all the kids to do a drum, because we always do a drum before we get out and do things with the kids. And I give the kids a little reminder about doing the right thing, and if they feel their emotions getting a little turbulent in their stomach, to be mindful and to take deep breaths. And so during the course of those reminders, because I'm wearing a fart shirt, I asked the kids if anyone wanted to pull my finger. And now you're probably thinking, primary kids, who wouldn't want to pull the principal's finger so he farts in front of everybody, right? Well, 98% of them didn't want to. Thankfully, I had a couple of my boys in grade 3 step up and try to pull my finger, but I was so taken back that nobody wanted to pull my finger. I couldn't even fart. The lesson is that even kids, even primary kids, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, who probably have dads and uncles and grandpas at home always getting them to pull their finger, will not pull your finger because they have boundaries. Which brings me to the topic of today's walk and talk. We're going to talk about boundaries. The reason why boundaries are so important for us is because we are running on fumes these days. I think more and more people I meet, especially my age, when we've, put 25 to 30 years into the system, when we're getting closer to retirement, we just don't have a lot left in the tank. Having boundaries does not mean you're being selfish at all. So the first thing you need to do is get that out of your head. Your kids aren't going to suffer. Your friends aren't going to suffer. Your colleagues aren't going to suffer. When you have boundaries in place and you're preserving your own mental well-being, holy, I thought that was Sasquatch behind me. It's just a pile of wood. Woo! Scary. Anyways, as I was saying, boundaries are not being selfish. They're not about putting up walls. They're not about caring less. They're all about preserving yourself so that you can put your best foot forward for everybody in your life that's important. And the biggest thing about boundaries for us adults is the guilt and the shame and the discomfort that comes with it. I talk a lot about kids needing to feel that discomfort to grow and to become stronger and more resilient kids. But, discomfort affects us too. If there's just that one more thing to do at work, or responding to that one more text from that person who doesn't stop texting when you text them, you just want to have a short conversation, you know who you are. Or just doing that one more favor for somebody. Or just staying an extra 15 minutes late just to get something done, even though it's going to be there in the morning. Saying no. No is big for a lot of people. A lot of people can't say no. And sometimes you just have to say no. That doesn't mean reciprocity is something that you should throw away, because it is important to be kind and to give the shirt off your back once in a while, but you can't do it at the expense of your own mental health, right? Because if you do it then and you burn out, guess who suffers? Your kids, because you won't have the energy for them. So just remember, if you feel like you're disappointing someone because you've said no and because you have boundaries, that's not a sign of you being a bad person. That's a sign of you protecting yourself. And that discomfort is going to get a lot easier the more you have your boundaries in place. We need to have boundaries with our kids when it comes to them wanting us to constantly watch them, constantly play with them, constantly be involved in what they're doing. Because if we don't have boundaries, they're going to become dependent. We're going to start enabling them. We're going to start doing that helicopter parenting thing or that lawnmower parenting thing. And when we do that, we're not raising strong, resilient kids. We're raising kids who are dependent on us for everything, right? So there's 2 reasons to have boundaries with our kids. One, to save your own mental health, to make sure that you're balanced. And again, I'm going to dive into the medicine wheel and the 4 quadrants of balance in our next video, because it's super important. Those good old indigenous teachings that I've been learning that I think everybody needs to know about. But the important piece is that it preserves our mental health. It allows our kids to become more resilient, more mentally strong, develop their critical and creative thinking skills, It allows them to be more socially and personally aware. They're socially aware too, because our kids need to recognize when we're tired and they need to just give us a break once in a while, right? And if they develop that when kids get into public, or if they're in classes, or if they're in some sort of lessons or playing on sports teams, they can start reading things better. They can start reading people better. They can start reading situations better, and they'll know when to push and they'll know when to pull, which is going to be great for their own development. So boundaries not only preserves us, it preserves them. So at the end of the day, like, what are some of the strategies that, that you can use? And some of the strategies that I use, because I'm one of those people ask me to do things and I'm all over it. I try to help out as much as I can, especially when it comes to academic stuff or kids stuff. I was just in Langley about 3 or 4 weeks ago doing Pro D, and the night before I went to some friend's house that I haven't seen in a long time. Hey, Finnegers, you better be watching this because you said you were going to subscribe. And we got around the table, and Peter was there, Paul was there, Monica was there, her husband was there. There was 3 international students there, and and the conversation came up about the school system and some of their trials and tribulations. And of course, they started asking questions, and I can't even help myself because I love talking about it. And so those kinds of things I have no boundaries for. Anybody stops me on the street or emails me, I'm always good about talking about kids, talking about the school system, trying to help people meander through the way it all works, which is part of the reason why I'm doing these walk and talks, right? I have things that I have to be very mindful of, and that when I start giving too much, I've got to really take a step back. And a lot of times it's just about taking a deep breath, just like the kids do. I got to take a deep breath, and I got to let my thinking take over, because if I don't think, I'll respond emotionally, and then I'll put too much effort into things that take away from the things in life that are more meaningful. Another thing that I've learned to do, I was never a big music guy until probably the last year. Every time I go do a workshop, or if I have something important coming up, I tend to turn on some good tunes now, and I find it allows me to escape my thoughts. Even when I get home from work, I take an extra 5 or 10 minutes in the truck, just because I know my kids are going to be demanding about dinner and other things and whatnot. And I got to make sure that I'm strong enough to have my own boundaries, so I can say no to this or yes to that, and put my foot down where I need to. And another good thing to do is just sitting in silence, or going for a walk in silence. I've kind of digressed on that. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts because I love researching education, and I love researching about kids and behavioral psychology and stuff. But every now and then I've just got to take the ear pods out, or AirPods, whatever you call them, and just walk in silence and let my thoughts work through, because then that allows me to balance those 4 quadrants, so that way I can put my best foot forward and put the right boundaries in place and not the wrong boundaries in place, and do the right thing for my kids, so I'm the best I can be for them and for other people. And I think that's the key. The key to boundaries is being emotionally stable, which means taking deep breaths, doing those things that I just talked about, because the more emotionally stable you are, you're going to put boundaries in place for the right things and not the wrong things. Because if we're emotional, we're going to say no to things we should say yes to. And we're going to say yes to things we should say no to. So the more we take 5 extra minutes in the truck, listen to some music, go for a walk without headphones, and do some of those things, the better we're going to be at establishing boundaries for our kids, our friends, our family. Because that's important, because we don't want to burn out. We want to be the best possible version of ourselves for everybody, even strangers in the grocery store. It's important to just kind of be that person, because that's what we're trying to teach our kids, right? We're trying to teach them to be mentally strong kids of good character, who do right, are respectful, all those things that I talk about in these YouTube videos. So anyways, I hope that helps, and maybe I'll wear my fart shirt in public. No, probably not a good idea. That's why I only wear it on Primary Fun Day, because that's probably the only place I can get away with it. Although now I'm thinking I can't get away with it at Primary Fun Day, considering only 2 boys stepped up to pull my finger. Like, what's wrong with you? Anyways, on that note, peace out. See you in a few Saturdays.